Hello and welcome back to the live stream, and to everyone a happy new year. It is 2026. I believe at this point everywhere in the world we've passed the midnight mark. It is 2026 for everyone, and it's looking like it might actually be a pretty good year. You know, New Year's is a complicated time for a lot of people. You've got all the New Year's resolutions, all of the hope for what will be coming in the next year, all of the, for most people, joy of Christmas having just come past. But it's also, you know, you look back on the last year and think to yourself, was it a good year? Am I thinking next year will be good? I've seen a lot of people posting and being like, oh, thank God we're done with 2025. And personally, I think 2025 was actually decent. You know, ignoring certain parts about the general state of the world, for me at least, 2025 has had some successes, and 2026 looks like it might actually shape up to be the first really good year in a little while. I think I've earned one at this point, considering everything. We're also past the quarter century mark. 26 years into the year 2000 plus. It's a strange feeling. You know, you learn about history in school and all these important dates and how things changed over certain time periods, a quarter, a half, 3/4 way through a century, and now here we are, having just gone past one of those sort of landmark years. How is this going to look in another 25 years' time? How are we going to look back on that? Difficult to say. Also, completely off script, I had an idea of what I was going to start this stream off with, and immediately beelined off into the side. For anyone who's here and maybe returning from previous streams, it's been a hot minute. 5 months, I think, since the last live stream. A lot longer than I had planned to be away. I did not intend to be gone 5 months, but you know, things happen. What can you do? If you've seen me previously, you might notice that we are looking quite different. We have gone two-dimensional, which is weird. Normally VTubers upgrade the other way around, you know? They start with a 2D model and then eventually transition to a nice fancy 3D. We've gone the other direction because my 3D model is a little thing I made myself in Vroid Studio, and it's, you know, I'm fairly proud of it, but it's really not the best. Whereas this now is the lovely customizable model by Suika that I acquired recently when it was on sale, and I've been loving playing around with this thing. I still need to tweak a few things with the face tracking, get little things sorted out, but I am not a 2D rigger, and it is quite a challenge to figure out what all of those parameters mean and what bit you need to tweak to get what effect. So I figured, hey, it's the first of the year. I've streamed, I think, both previous January 1sts, or maybe even the last 3 years of January 1sts. Might as well keep up the tradition and have a little live stream here and try out this model so that I can actually watch the VOD back and figure out what bits I need to tweak and to fix. But yeah, it's very nice. I love playing around with VTuber models. One of my favorite things when I started working with Vroid was just sticking whatever work in progress I had into VSeeFace and messing around with it. But, you know, I've been wanting to move over to VTube Studio away from VSeeFace because of a few of the integration features it has and stuff like that. I did recently come into possession of a Stream Deck, which is a very cool little piece of tech. But all of the interaction, all of the little button things and the plugins and stuff, and all of the other plugins for the program that you can use on Stream Deck as well, are for VTube Studio, not for VSeeFace. So I wanted to make the hop over to 2D, had the opportunity and took it, and yeah, so far it's nice. I think I will keep using the 3D model, for my YouTube videos at least, and just use this model for live streams. Mostly because I don't want to have to go through all of my social media accounts and take new pictures for my icons and stuff, for my profile pictures, because they're all of the old model, and then if someone sees that old model everywhere and then clicks on my videos and it's like, hey, this person looks completely different, I don't think that'll be great. It's bad branding, you know, you gotta have brand recognition. So I will stick with the old model for YouTube videos, since that is technically speaking supposed to be the main thing. I did manage to at least get out like one YouTube video while I was on unofficial stream hiatus, which is better than nothing, I suppose. Yeah, you do what you can. I think that was most of the preamble. I mean, there's more stuff to talk about. What the last year's been. Mostly I've been seeing people do game recaps, you know. Most of the people that I watch online are either doing sort of writing and world building stuff, surprise surprise, or they're doing gaming. So most of people's end of year recaps is just their what's my favorite games this year been. And wow, what a year we've had for gaming. There's been a lot of good stuff. A lot of really good stuff. Some disappointments here and there as well. For me personally, as a big fan of a lot of the Paradox games, I was very excited for Europa Universalis 5, and it released and it was fantastic, and then they spent the last month just kinda screwing around with it, and my excitement has died off a little bit. Just a touch. You know, it's still a pretty cool game, but I'm gonna wait a little for a couple more patches for them to sort out what direction they want to take this whole thing in before I hop back into it. On that topic, actually, let me see if I can bring this up over here. Yes, we have the Steam Awards. You know why? Did I vote in the last Steam Awards? I can't even remember what games were up. But I feel like it's worth taking a quick look through, because there have been like some really great games this year. I mean, Silksong, incredible that this is finally released. It feels almost fake to see that Silksong is now real. There we go, going off the edge of the screen a bit. I have to get used to how the movement is different. Like, if I tilt my head, my whole body shifts way more than it did on the other model. But I'll need to learn how to pilot this one. That's a thing that a lot of VTubers will tell, like more experienced ones will tell people when they talk about how good their tracking is and stuff like that. You've got to learn to actually use the thing once you have it. Doesn't matter how good the tracking is. If you don't shift around, if you don't emote and make use of all of your tracking, then it's not going to look as good. There's this one VR chat streamer, the name escapes me right now, but they did this very interesting video about how they move in order to make themselves look more animated and also look more cartoonish almost. And a lot of it was like dipping with their whole body and leading with the head when moving, so instead of like stepping to the side, they dip down in an arc with their head and then have the body follow. It was interesting stuff, and it's really important stuff if you want to get the movement right. I know that similar kind of stuff gets studied when you want to do, for example, like puppetry, or the various people who have controlled Muppets over time have a lot to say about what you need to do to make them feel alive. But this is me getting sidetracked once again. Let's have a look through the Steam Awards, see what I want to vote for. I think for Game of the Year, I gotta be honest, Dispatch. I've watched some people play Dispatch, and it's got some fun stuff going on. It's a good game. I don't know that it should be up on Game of the Year. Kingdom Come I can't comment on, I don't know anything about it. Arc Raiders I have such conflicted feelings on, because it's in many regards an incredible game, but there's a large, long conversation to be had about AI usage, which I'm not going to go over here. Ricky recently posted a video, I think, that goes over a lot of the important bits and covers really what the concerns are, what the pros and the cons are. And then, of course, you know, the two juggernauts this year, the elephant in the room, Silksong, which is real, and Expedition 33, which is stunningly beautiful. Having played none of this, and a little bit of this, and having watched a lot of this and none of this because I didn't want to spoil myself, I really don't know which one to go for. I feel like they both deserve it for different reasons. And I think, for me personally, it would probably have to go to Silksong. I feel like Expedition 33 deserves to win it more, if I'm being quite honest. But I feel like my vote has to go to Silksong. VR Game of the Year, I appreciate that they have this category. Part of it is probably marketing on their part, because obviously Steam sells VR equipment. But still, it's nice that it hasn't been abandoned. You know, VR gaming kind of had a brief craze before people realized the limitations, and then they just kind of gave up on it, which I think is sad, because a lot of VR games are really, really good, and the technology is still super, super fun. It just doesn't get much time in the spotlight, it doesn't get much appreciation. I haven't seen almost any of these games. I've watched Scary Game Squad play a little bit of Midnight Walk on a second monitor, so that's where my vote's gonna go here. The Labor of Love Award. I don't think Baldur's Gate 3 has had nearly as much extra work done in it as the others. Dota 2, I don't know if this counts, because it's a MOBA. Being continually worked on is kind of part of their business model. They cease to exist if they're not. And isn't Rust one of those games that's in like eternal development? I think it's gotta go to No Man's Sky here, out of these. Some of these games I think are just getting updates that they're supposed to, they're not being worked on past what you might expect. Best game on Steam Deck. I don't own a Steam Deck. I have seen people play all of these. I haven't seen Digimon Story, but I have seen all the rest of these played, and from what I know of the Steam Deck and what it's like to play on it, I feel like either Hades 2 or Clover Pit has to take it, right? I feel like Clover Pit is probably the easier game to pick up and put down quickly, depending on how you use your Steam Deck. And Hades 2 is pretty good. From what I've heard, people are pretty happy with it as a sequel. I've only played a little bit of Hades 1 and it wasn't quite my type of thing. Vorlex Pit is a surprising one. This kind of came out of nowhere and suddenly like half the people I watch online were playing it and saying very positive things about it, but I don't really know much about the game. I do almost feel like I want to give it to this just based on art style, but that's not what the category is. So I'm gonna go ahead and select Clover Pit. Better with Friends Award. Just to peek. I don't think there's even a discussion to be had here. Repo maybe as a runner-up. Split Fiction is built to be with a friend. Schedule 1 I've never watched, I don't care. Battlefield is Battlefield, whatever, it's gotta go to peak. Outstanding Visual Style. I would be tempted to go for Silent Hill F, there's some really nice design in there. Doom looks good, but it's just kind of Doom. It's not doing anything particularly interesting. Like it's recognizable, but it isn't breaking the mold in any particular way. So Dream Barbecue has to take it for the sheer uniqueness and how well they managed to tie it all together. Innovative gameplay, and there is the thing that has broken my heart, EU5, because I would have nominated EU5 for this before the patches started. After the patches, It's a lot of paradox innovation, and not in a good way. You know, if you watch the Lemon Cake videos, it's a lot of paradox innovation. But the base game is still really, like, there's so many things that are wrong with it and messed up with it, and places where they're not, where they seem so unfocused and unsure of what they're doing with the game. But then there's just so much game there that for every bad thing there's like 4 good things. I don't think I can give this an award, and certainly not for innovative gameplay, but I do adore this game. I do really adore this game. And then Mage Arena is the one that, because there's been a bunch of word control, like speech control games recently, but I think Mage Arena is the one that kicked off the trend. And while I don't think it's as intricate as Blueprints, which has a lot of cool stuff going in, I do think it's more innovative. Voice control isn't new, but voice control that genuinely enhances the game experience really is. There's been a lot of bad voice control games. Best game I suck at? The only one I've really played is this, but from what I've watched, I feel like I probably have to give this to Night Rain. Soundtrack, I'm sorry Deltarune, but it's Expedition 33. No discussion to be had. Outstanding story rich. I cannot make a fair judgment here, not knowing anything about the stories. If you had asked me, off the top of my head, I wouldn't have thought that Dying Light even has a story at all. Now goes to Dispatch, and the Sit Back and Relax award. I don't know if that Megabonk fits the vibe here. I can kind of see it for like a flow state kind of thing. I'm not the sort of person who plays Power Wash Simulator, but having seen it played, it does seem like a lot of people are having a very nice relaxing time with this. Very nice. That all being said, and a little bit of reminiscing about the past aside, now it is time to look into the future. Which means an empty document. I have moved off of using Google Drive and Google Docs for my writing. Let me just take a sip of my drink real quick. Yeah, I've kind of moved off of them. It's a nice storage solution, but a lot of the appeal of it comes from being able to open it on multiple devices, and I'm only using one device. I did start, I was using in previous streams a lot of the time Obsidian Notes, which I think is a very nice app for organizing and such. It does get a little tedious navigating between the repositories and stuff. I feel like that really lends itself better to fairly large projects, which is what I intend to use it for in future. Because of how nice it is for organization and being able to have the different nodes that all connect to each other. So now, in the meantime, I'm trying out the 30-day trial on Scrivener to see how much I like that. And so far, yeah, from a little bit of playing around I've done and a few other documents, Scrivener seems pretty good. We'll see how it goes in the long term, though. For today, as a little gentle writing and world building activity to bring us into the new year, something a little fun, not to stress too much about. I did consider playing some games, and then there just wasn't anything I wanted to play that I also wanted to be streaming at the same time. I would have played EU5, honestly, if I weren't still learning the game, right? Like EU4 I've played like 2,000 plus hours. It's second nature to the extent that I can talk at the same time as doing stuff in-game. EU5, There's still a lot of stuff that I'm learning and getting used to in that game, so it's really much too early for me to try and stream that. I'm not going to be able to put a proper sentence together with all my brain power dedicated to figuring out where to expand RGOs and everything else. So a little bit of writing, and what I thought I would do today, and pardon me here as I try to remember how to reach around my microphone and type. I'm really out of practice. 5 months was far too long of a gap. It took me something like an hour to go through all of my programs and settings and stuff and get everything set up the way I wanted it to be so that I could stream properly. Fortunately, once I've got, now that I have the Stream Deck, once I've got that all set up properly and all the buttons in place, I'll be able to just hit a key and it will open all my programs and put them where I want them on the screen on both monitors, which is such a hassle every single time. Like, you want to do one little live stream and now I have the browser open to see Twitch and stuff and have all the Twitch actions. I've got Streamlabs open, I've got my word processor open, I've got Steam, and then Steam's running VTube Studio, and then I've got Media Player for the background music. And this is the reduced version. This is me having learned some things that I don't need, so I keep those closed now. Anyway, constantly getting sidetracked. What I was thinking about doing today is recently I've been reading a little bit of sci-fi here and there, which is unfortunately unusual for me. I love sci-fi conceptually. I could name plenty of sci-fi stories that I enjoy, but most of the sci-fi that I really have consumed in recent years has been movies and TV shows. Very, very little written, and when I look at my bookshelves, it's almost entirely fantasy books. So I figured, since I've read a little sci-fi recently, why not do some sci-fi brainstorming and world building? So what we're going to do today is the apartment on a ship, and I swear I can touch type, and the character found in them. There we go. Don't overthink it. My touch typing gets worse and worse the more I'm thinking about what I'm doing. I need to just let my fingers move. Yeah, the part/departments are on a ship, on a spaceship, and a character's found in them. Certain settings really build a structure around them in a very distinct way that others don't. Right, like some settings don't really come with a framework attached to the same extent that others do. Or they do, and it's very limited. Like, for example, if you're writing a mystery story, that can go in a lot of different directions. And it doesn't really provide you much until you narrow it down. Like, a detective story obviously has to have a detective, and then from there you can extrapolate a little bit about, often detectives have a partner who, maybe if a detective is the brains, the partner is the brawns of the operation, something like that. In a police procedural, there's certain archetypes, a lot of it comes from Sherlock Holmes. But sci-fi on a ship really kind of shouts at you from the get-go, like, hey, here are some things you could include, here are some characters you can build. For the simple fact that a spaceship is a thing almost defined by its functionality, which means when you're world building, well, that functionality has to be taken into account, and you have to fill out all of the roles available. So, for example, on the ship bridge, you're gonna have... how do I want to lay this out? Like this, maybe? On the bridge, you want to have captain, navigation, comms, what else? The helm, depending on how you've got your sci-fi set up. Weapons, stuff like that. And then each of those needs to have a character, and those characters tend to have their own archetypes as well, which I find quite enjoyable. I don't know why, the more I've gotten into analyzing and thinking about and writing, the more I find myself enjoying really structured genres and such, things where you can look at and go, oh yeah, this and this is included because these are the expectations of a genre, and here's where they've drawn from in the past and what like major works have codified these expectations. What else? We can have engineering. That's a big one. Hydroponics or something of the sort. Manufacturing and salvage, if we want to split those up. It will depend a little bit on the size or class of ship and its purpose. Military vessel, transport, exploration, colony ship. That's a fairly unique one for sci-fi, because like obviously colonization happened in real life on the ground, but the ships they weren't the same as sci-fi colony ships, I think, in a lot of ways, because the sci-fi tends to assume empty planets and that you need to bring with you everything to kickstart anything, right? Like you don't want to build up to a spacefaring civilization from scratch. You're not going to a new planet and chopping down trees to build your huts with. You're rolling out the fabricators and all sorts of other stuff to build a full advanced technological society there and then. Which makes the sci-fi colony ship so much more interesting. Plus, of course, the questions of distance and you have warp drives. Is this a generational colony ship? Is everyone in stasis and only gets woken up when you arrive? That kind of thing. That's over bridge, engineering. Depending on how you do it, some of these can be their own section. Maybe we want to rephrase this as the captain and the officers for weapons, comms, navigation. What else did I have? Can we go back? Navigations, helm, comms, weapons. Okay, that is all I had. Okay. Yeah, the officers, because these actual systems aren't on the bridge necessarily, but the people in charge of them are. Yeah, then engineering, manufacturing / salvage, hydroponics, if you've got food production on board at all, if it's not just either replicators or you have all your food in storage and it just gets cooked. Speaking of which, the mess / kitchen is a good one as well. They will look very, very different depending on the size of your ship, of course, and the class and purpose of it. There's a big difference between, what was it called, 10 Forward on the Enterprise? Their little bar and lounge with a barkeeper and seating, and you can sit there and play board games or whatever, compared to like a hard sci-fi kind of setting where it's 5 people on a ship and they've got a little nook where they keep the dried out packets of whatever rations they're eating. Very different vibe to it. What else might a spaceship need? But you can have very specific things. I'm trying to keep it more general, because specific things require you to know what universe you're world building for. Right, like, does your ship need a navigation chamber for your psionic to go in and chart a path through the warp if you're in Warhammer, or names escape me, but I know other settings have done the same thing. Warhammer is not the only one to do the whole use psychics to navigate through the warp thing. I might need to move myself even further over, because I'm realizing that I've got a tendency to tilt my head to the left, which means I tilt it, like when I'm thinking, I tilt my head to the left, which means I tilt it off screen. Yeah. Things we figure out as we go. Then I'm gonna block off part of the picture. Oh. Oh. No, that's worse. Did I just make myself a bit smaller? It seems a shame when I've just got this funky new model to play around with. However, it does me no good to do a writing stream and have people not be able to see the writing because my head's covering it. Why can I not grab the corner of it? Oh my god. Come on. There we go. Yeah, that's made minimal difference. And of course I'm slightly off center when I'm looking off to the other monitor. Okay, we'll figure it out. That's what this stream is for, testing things. Watch the VOD back later, learn from it. Alright, moving on. Right, so bridge engineering. Do we could have a dedicated weapons, like, section of the ship. That one's kind of rare. It tends to be that weapons is just a console on the bridge that controls them all, because they're generally on the outside of the ship. You know, you've got a bunch of lasers or phasers or missile launchers or whatever all around the outside of a ship, and they need to be controlled from a central location, and that central location tends to be on the bridge so the captain can give orders to his officers. So a separate weapons area is rarer. Not unheard of, but rarer. Much better would be a hangar bay. Be that for fighters you're launching, or for exploration ships, or just a general purpose one to give you access to space. I very much enjoy the ones that have a sort of force field wall that the ships can fly through but keeps the atmosphere in. I think that always looks very cool. It is one of those things that you kind of have to not think about too hard when it comes to your sci-fi, because it raises so many questions about how exactly that technology functions and how else you could use it, a lot of which are just better left unasked. Bridge, engineering, hydroponics, manufacturing and salvage. I feel like manufacturing and salvage really does deserve to be separate from engineering, because the purposes are just so different. Like, engineering is the engines, right? It's where your warp core is a real important bit of a ship, which is a little different, I think, from real life. I'm not an expert by any means on real life advanced modern vessels, but my general understanding is that while there will be a specific spot where an engine is, on a larger ship you might have more than one for turning each propeller, and even if you don't, there's so many interconnected components and pieces that it's wrong to think of there being a single engineering section that controls and sorts the whole thing. Which is true to a certain extent in sci-fi as well. Like, there's so many episodes of Star Trek where something goes wrong somewhere and then they need to fix cabling running throughout the entire ship because it's blown out in some random section. But still, I think with the sheer amount of focus on propulsion in sci-fi, whether it's sub-light speed and you gotta figure out whether you've got like a rocket on the back of your ship that needs propellant and stuff, or if it's faster than light and then you have your warp drive or jump drive or whatever, it really does focus a lot of it in one single place, which is why you have an engineering bay in sci-fi quite often. On the complete opposite end to all of this very functional ship stuff, crew quarters. Somewhat important as well, if you've got crew on your ship. Potentially, do we lump under crew quarters the AI core? That's a pretty popular one as well. A single big central processor where your ship's computer runs everything from. Which is the way we do it in real life mostly as well, right? Like, computer systems don't tend to be distributed all over whatever they're running, right? You don't have your CPU sitting somewhere and your graphics card sitting somewhere else. Like, no, they're right next to each other, plugged into each other to reduce latency and such. And then you've got cables going to your peripherals. So this one does make sense to centralize much more even than engineering does. But maybe that doesn't really fit in under the crew quarters label. Just because the AI doesn't necessarily have to be fully capable of independent thought. I like them like that, just because it's interesting, but a regular old ship's computer a la Star Trek definitely works as well. And in Star Wars you get your little droids, your R2-D2 sitting in the ship, and that's pretty cool in its own way. I think they did a very, I'm usually more of a Star Trek fan. Star Wars isn't so much my thing. I watch it sometimes for the spectacle, but in terms of the world building, the story and such, I'm mostly more watching Star Trek. But they do a lot of very cool little details. I think they stand out more in fanfiction sometimes, just because it has the opportunity to slow down a bit and collate everything from the God knows how many books and one-off movies and animated series and video games and stuff. I've not watched all that, I don't know all of the deep lore, but the fanfic writers do, so they'll include some random bit of trivia that's super cool, and then you look it up and it's like, oh yeah, this came from a single novel published in 1980 that got 2 printed copies ever. It's just like, how did you hear about this? How did you, the author, figure this out? I have the same thing for Pokemon fanfics as well, where it's like, okay, how many of the Pokemon do you just have memorized? And you're pulling this lore from the games and the anime and the manga and every little piece of media? Like, how much time are you dedicating to this? It's honestly impressive. Also a bit of a shame, because I would love to write some Pokemon fanfic, but I can't even remember like the full list of Pokemon for any single Pokemon game, never mind all of the lore that you need to actually write a convincing Pokemon world. So that one is firmly out of my reach. Firmly. Getting a little distracted, however. But to come back to this, you tend to have there's often an officer for each part/system of the ship. Oh yeah, Scrivener indents paragraphs in like the printed book style, not an online style, but I think that's fine. It doesn't really cause any issues to the readability on here. So like engineering will have a chief engineer who is an officer, but he's not on the bridge, generally speaking. And the chief engineers kind of come in different types, right? Like you get the kind of mad scientist guy, you're Scotty basically. It's almost like a whole character archetype on its own of like the overworked chief of engineering who's just doing his best to keep the ship running, and then the captain comes along and says we need to go at full power, and he's like, well, if we go at full power it's going to explode, I don't know if we can do it, and the captain goes, well, we have to do it anyway, and then they make it work. And that shows up in so many different sci-fi shows. I think it's probably the most popular engineer archetype, right? Then there's kind of the nerd, basically, right? Like the kind of engineer. This one's usually more common on smaller ships. I want to say Firefly's engineer was like that, but it's been so long since I watched that show I couldn't say that confidently. Whereas like this is a small ship, there's like maybe a dozen people on board if we're pushing it, and the engineer just kind of loves it. The ship is usually a little bit more run down, and they just enjoy tinkering around with it, keeping everything working. It's very much their ship. There is no engineering crew that they're in charge of. They're the ones doing all of this stuff. I don't know whether nerd is really the correct word, because they are nerds, but does that really describe the archetype? What's a better way of summarizing that kind of personality? Being the ship enthusiast, perhaps? Yeah, very enthusiastic about it, but enthusiast kind of sounds like amateur, like it's not a professional, it's an enthusiast, which is not the image I'm trying to go for here. The difficulties of language. You know what you're talking about, but now you need to find the right word for it so someone else will know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's a terrible as a summary, but it's the best I can do for now, really. Finally back, Curie model. Yeah, we're trying out the Suica model that I've customized a little bit for myself. Looks very lovely. I'll still be using my self-made 3D model for the YouTube videos, but just for the live streams, I feel like this one is good because assuming we ever unlock channel points and stuff, I'll be able to do interactive redeems and such, which I just can't quite get working on VC Face, so switching over to VTube Studio is very good. Plus it means that I can do all of the buttons and stuff on my Stream Deck, and we can do stuff like this, which is very, very cute. Looking forward to making more use of it over time. For now, we'll just sit off to the side of it. I've got to look down here, find the right button, then look over here, way off on the left where I've got Streamlabs open, and see that it's actually triggered correctly. I might need to rearrange my monitors, I don't know. Or get a third monitor so I can have one like above this one where I can put a preview of myself, because I need to have chat right to the left here so I can read that quickly. But that means that my stream preview is all the way off over here. It's difficult, but we'll figure it out. Yeah, but chief engineer. You get various assorted scientist types, but I don't think those are really a unique feature of the sci-fi ship makeup. Those are just kind of scientist architects in general. Scientist archetypes in general. You get those in all sorts of shows, like the very stiff, stuck-up scientist, the hyperfixation in their specific field kind of scientist, all those sorts. Only 3, get like 10, 20, sky's the limit. I think my budget is the limit, actually. Monitors and then more monitor arms are not cheap. Not cheap at all. Actually, I'm saying that monitors aren't cheap. Monitor arms? Surprisingly affordable. I always had this impression for some reason that getting monitor arms instead of just a stand or whatever would cost a whole bunch of money. And then I went and looked it up and it was like, oh yeah, 20 quid for a monitor's arm that will, like, a stand that has 2 arms for 2 monitors. And it's like, really? That's it? That's all? So I went and got one of those, and it's lovely. I've got so much more desk space now. Manufacturing / salvage, very engineering adjacent. You also get the enthusiastic mechanic here. But I feel like for this kind of stuff, when you're thinking about the kind of forge foundry environment, you're melting stuff down, you're forging into new, you're building stuff, it's more manufacturing than building. You get the graph / confrontational Forge Master, kind of like what's the example? Like what's his name? Ornn in League of Legends. I don't know why that's the first one that pops to mind. But yeah, the very no-nonsense kind of type, where it's just like, yeah, get the part built, get it, move on to the next one, and nothing more than that. They're almost the opposite to this. They're not in it for the love of the game. It is purely a job for them. Which you don't see so much for the engineering. I feel like the chief engineer position, because of the knowledge and expertise it requires, and the work and kind of improvisation that goes into that sort of work, it doesn't fit the character archetype as much. You could have a rough, no-nonsense, almost hates the job sort of type in engineering, but I don't think they will be able to fulfill the same functions for the story as someone who does care about their work can. Like the classic scene of the captain asking the engineer if they can pull it off, and the engineer having to think about it, and then it's like, no, or we'll probably explode, but we can try. It doesn't happen with this kind of character. They'll just say no, and then that's the end of the conversation. And then what do you do with your scene, right? Where do you go from there? Hello Tim, hope you're having a good day. Yeah, this is not a very yes and kind of character. This is a no and kind of character. With this, you can have like a scene where another person on the ship, not the captain, like someone wants a little thing made, like maybe they want to have some trinket manufactured as a gift for another crew member, and this character will just tell them, no, not doing it. And then you can work it from there and have some actual story with it and some character interaction, maybe even some character growth that fits for this, but doesn't fit for this, which is why you don't see this kind of character over here. The mess / kitchen, the cook, of course. And the cook, that's an interesting one, because it's a very, very social role. A lot of the characters on a ship even like a civilian ship, a lot of the characters are going to be fairly skilled. They have to be pretty professional just because the setting demands it. Maybe a very soft sci-fi kind of future, where space travel is as easy as hopping in a car, doesn't have this, but for most sci-fi, a ship crew has to kind of know what they're doing to a certain extent, which means a lot of their roles are defined by their capability, whereas cooking, obviously cooking is a skill, and you can work really, really hard to become a really, really good cook. But if you just need to provide a meal, or even if your focus is on quantity because you've got a whole crew to feed, then the bar is not as high in the skill department. It's one of those things that's like, it's not easy, but it is simple, which leaves a lot of room for the cook to be defined by their personality and their interaction. How do they work and talk with the rest of the crew? So you have like Neelix in Star Trek and stuff like that. So you have a kind of jovial, almost barkeeper, someone who's chatting with all of the rest of the crew, who's getting involved, who's hearing out people's troubles and stuff like that. And similarly, because I did put like mess/kitchen, the actual barkeeper, what was her name in TNG? Guinan or something? What was she called? The one who's like from some ancient race that lost their homeworld, and at one point she's got beef with the Q. Or Guinan? Damn, I cannot remember. I guess I need to go rewatch the entirety of Star Trek TNG. Always like the angry slapstick cook trope, like in The Party. I don't know The Party, but yes, angry overworked, sort of professional kitchen at lunch rush, that kind of vibe. Those can be pretty funny as well. Someone who's working a customer service job and really feeling it. Party is a Peter Sellers film. Okay, I don't know who Peter Sellers is either, unfortunately, but I might check it out. There's an angry cook and a drunk waiter. Okay, interesting. Oh yeah, the best thing to do to an angry character is give them someone annoying. Ideally even someone who's annoying for like no good reason. That being said, drunk waiter, the kitchen boy, the waiter slash errand runner fits together very well with the angry cook. Someone for the anger to be directed at, deserving or not, and someone for the rest of the crew to interact with in a more positive way than the angry cook. You can also have the completely... oh, that was horrifically misspelled. Completely disinterest. What am I even... oh, that came out correctly. Wow. I thought I completely misspelled that. Completely disinterested, so like a lunch lady kind of character, you know, serves you a scoop of slop and ignores you, right? You can maybe picture this kind of character where you're going along in like a school canteen kind of thing, with the glass above the trays of food. You push your tray along, they give you a scoop of whatever horror they're serving that day, and then you step along to the side, and this person is not interested in talking with you whatsoever. depending on the setting, like in cartoons and stuff, it usually turns out that actually they're just way overworked and they are really sweet when someone's nice to them. But most of the time they're just staring into the middle distance and serving you scoops of slop. I think I probably like the kind, enthusiastic cook the most. I think they just add a lot to the ship, and it's a very easy character to put into a story and explore other characters with. But like a character that you have a perfect excuse for other people to go to and open up with, and a character who, by their profession, is motivated to interact with other characters. Fantastic. If you need to do exposition and you don't want it to feel like you're just dumping exposition, what you have to do is find excuses or reasons for your characters to be talking about certain things. And there's few things better for that than someone whose entire job is to pry into other people's nonsense. Or maybe not pry, but to meet them in a situation where they might feel a bit more open to sharing, and then listen to them. Always love bartenders for that role. Yeah, it's great. As for writers, it's a really, really useful tool. It's probably, off the top of my head, I can't really think of what other roles fit into that. There's a reason the barkeeper is used so often, because there's not that many jobs that are good for that kind of thing. You see other tropes used for it, like lots of mystery kind of stories, crime thrillers and stuff. Use the trope where the whole thing is put through the lens of a police interview. Like whatever criminal has been caught at the start of the story, and then the actual story itself is them recounting the events to the police, which gives you an excuse to drop in whatever exposition you want, because it's all from a perspective of a person telling a story. So if they want to put in a little bit of extra information, then you, the author, can now put in whatever information you want to give to your readers and have it feel completely natural, which is fantastic. Let me just have a drink quickly. Yeah, a waiter, a doctor. Oh, jeez, a doctor. Medical is one of the very important parts of a ship. We absolutely need to have a medical bay. I feel like the character tropes for the medical bay, very similar to engineering for like the rest of the staff besides the chief engineer, are less defined by the sci-fi setting and more defined by their own pre-existing notions. Right, like the doctor who's very nice and caring for their patients, the cold and aloof medical professional, these are all things that come from like medical dramas and from other stories and their expectations of what a doctor might be like. They're not really reshaped by sci-fi so much. But like, if you think about sci-fi, and you might maybe have an enthusiastic scientist who wants to know more about alien biology and who's always excited to have a patient or whatever, then that's just kind of, you could have that in a non-sci-fi setting. It's not defined by the sci-fi at all. So while the medical bay is important and there's a lot of characters you can have in there, they're not generally sci-fi defined. They're just medical staff. What sort of janitors and guards? Not for interacting with people to learn gossip, but more as just being everywhere and knowing things because nobody really pays them any mind. Yeah, guards is maybe a bit more of an interesting one there. I feel like janitors is almost overused in that regard. It feels like it's moved from trope to cliche but certainly you can do it well as well. And yeah, guards gossiping, I feel like the guards work so well because of the different settings, the different situations you can put them in, where having the guards around matters. Like if you've got characters who aren't up to anything and they're just going along, then yeah, you can just have them talk with some guards. You can maybe even have the guards do exposition. They can tell them like, oh yeah, we've had this and this recently, so be careful, don't stay out at night. Or like, oh, the local marshal has put in orders for a curfew recently, so now you've got the guards can provide that information and open up an easy conversation. If you've got characters who are sneaking around, then having them overhear the guards talking is also an easy way to slip information in. Maybe less so for writing, because you do have to decide that what the guards are saying is important enough to your story to put their speech into the text. Whereas if it's like a video game, you can just have the guards talk and they just kind of exist there. It's expected by the player for the guards to be doing stuff and saying things to each other, because they're people that the player can just kind of ignore and work around. Whereas when you're writing it, you have a lot more restriction on that. But even then, it does help. You can not put it in as smoothly, I think, as say the bartender, but you can still put it in fairly smoothly and have it feel natural. The janitor, there are ways to do that more interestingly. I very much enjoyed the janitor in Control, the video game. I thought that was done really nicely. It did play a lot with that, as he said, the idea that these are people who blend into the background, people that get ignored a lot. And the way Control did it wasn't very innovative or anything with what the janitor ended up, how the janitor sort of subverted that trope a little bit. But it doesn't have to be innovative, it just has to be well executed a lot of the time, and I think Control did execute it well. I'm also thinking now, talking about guards, security is another one. And I feel like security personnel do get affected by guards a little, by the sci-fi setting a little bit, because it really changes what it means to be part of security. Like, are these are they just regular crew? Are they sci-fi super soldiers here? Genetically augmented, using power armor. Is it safe to open fire on H? Or do you have to worry about, putting a hole in the hull and everyone getting vented into space and stuff like that? I don't know whether actual real-life ships have dedicated security personnel. Like, does a military vessel have people whose job is on-board security? Or because they're all soldiers, security is just like, partly if someone's doing something they're not allowed to, then the rest of the soldiers arrest them. A cruise ship will have security, right? Like, it has to, surely. There will be people whose job it is to deal with unruly guests. Speaking of security and also TNG, I think it's interesting to look at Worf. I mean, any character in TNG is interesting to look at, but yes, Worf. Who's got the whole trope named after him, being Worfed, where the new, he's supposed to be the big scary muscle guy, and when they want to introduce the villain of the episode and get across that the villain of the episode is very big and scary and muscly, they have him beat up Worf, which means that the crew's big scary muscle guy, more often than not, finds himself losing fights to establish that someone else is scary, which makes him look not very scary at all. But yeah. Why you expect to need a security department? Is this their only job? Do they soldiers or do boarding? Questions to some of these questions are going to the answers to some of these questions are going to depend on exactly what setting you're writing in, and how your technology works. Is shipboarding even a thing in your universe? If it's not, then obviously security is not going to be doing that. If it is, then do you have separate soldiers on board next to your security? Because soldiers are going to be trained to deal with combat situations, whereas security might be trained to de-escalate a situation. If your ship is large enough, like a generational colony ship, is security base a police force? I assume on the military ship security will be like military police. Yeah. I'm gonna admit I don't know much about military police. I've watched some episodes of NCIS, Navy Criminal Investigative Service, but they don't tend to actually go on ships a lot of the time. A lot of their crimes are just like, yeah, this was a Navy person, but obviously they're in port, they're on land. Let me take a drink. Anything else about security that's really affected by being on a spaceship? Depending on your sci-fi story, if they're stuck out in the middle of nowhere and there's no supplies or whatever, but that starts to become a separate thing from being sci-fi. The trapped in the middle of the ocean story has the same tropes as stuck in the middle of space for a large part. I think really the augmentations and the expectation of what are they supposed to do is the most interesting parts for sci-fi, specifically for a security force. The hangar bay, where you have your ace pilots. Mech pilots, perhaps, as well? They don't have a lot of character traits attached to them specifically for being in sci-fi, I think. Mecha is kind of its own genre. That's not a general sci-fi thing, that's a sci-fi sub-genre. I don't think that really fits into what we're looking at here. I think the ace pilot probably is much the same on a spaceship as they are on Earth. It's not one I'm super familiar with. Like, if I try to think of ace pilots and there's those kind of character tropes, then we've got like Maverick from Top Gun, which I've never watched. I've just seen a couple clips on YouTube of them flying around. And what's her name? Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica? Hang on, let me check. Battlestar Galactica. Yeah, Starbuck was the fighter pilot from Battlestar Galactica, and that's like as many ace pilots as I've got in my mental library. There's not a lot of conclusions I can really draw on that one. Fighters in sci-fi in general are interesting just because of the questions they ask about what kind of combat you're engaging in and how the weapons and such work, but then that gets setting specific and not sci-fi general. Not really much more to say in that front. Crew quarters. I don't think there's a specific person we need to attach to that. You can have kind of like someone in charge of the whole thing, whose job it is to keep everything clean and tidy and stuff, but that's not really an interesting character for sci-fi specifically. If you're including this kind of person in your story, it's because it fits to your specific sci-fi setting and not because it's integral to the spaceship experience in general, right? Like the chief engineer, if your ship doesn't have a chief engineer, you are making the decision to exclude this character trope. Otherwise it would be here by default, whereas someone whose job it is to oversee the crew quarters, you're choosing to include that person. You specifically build a sci-fi setting where your ship is big enough to have enough crew quarters that someone needs to be overseeing them, too small for it to just be people's houses they're living in, so it's not like a colony ship. It is, you know, a crew on like a military ship that needs their rooms maintained or bunks checked or whatever. I don't know. This is something you're choosing to put in and not something that's part of the general makeup of this. Medical, we've talked about doctors and such. They're also pretty well established outside of sci-fi. I'm trying to think. Mostly it's doctors from Star Trek, and they've varied quite a lot, but usually they're just doing their job, dealing with weird alien diseases and stuff. There's been a couple episodes where we've dealt with like medical ethics and stuff like that, and they've had doctors from other ships or stations or whatever they've picked up and had to work with, and those are interesting episodes, but you probably don't have that kind of character as one of your main characters on the ship. Or if you do, they're going to be very central to the plot. Does being in space change that from a general sort of mad science plot? Probably not. So I suppose in that regard, like, also the cook isn't changed by being in sci-fi. They're changed by being on a ship, certainly. Like, the ship's cook is a different character to the local barkeeper, simply by the fact that there's no other options. You have to go to this person. You can't just decide that you want to go to a different bar or stay at home that evening. You have to go to this person and you have to learn to interact with them. That's one of the overall defining things for a lot of the roles on a spaceship or in a ship in general, that you're stuck with those people to a certain extent. Hydro bridge, engineering, hydroponics, a crew quarters. There's probably more that I haven't thought of. But they're also not coming to mind now. If I knew what I don't know, then I would know everything. Unfortunately, scanners, maybe? You can have someone on scanners on the bridge, but spaceships do... oh, wrong one. Spaceships do tend to have like a dedicated scanner module, a room somewhere whose whole job it is to oversee that and see what they find. Made more important by the size of space and all the interesting anomalies that pop in sci-fi. If you do have someone on the scanner module, someone whose whole job it is to find stuff out there, do they have any defining character traits? I feel like I've seen a couple episodes of various shows where it suddenly becomes really relevant that they need to find a specific thing, and whoever's in charge of scanners on the bridge can't do it without like modifying the sensor array. Oh yeah, sensor array, that's what the term was. Sensors. But I don't think that you attach a specific person to this. I mean, they'd be the scientist type, but similar to that, similar to in here. Not really anything more specific we need to say about them. They do usually be more of a loner type. The on-planet would be observatory staff. Which is interesting because we do have people, you know, using all sorts of scanners and satellites and stuff to peer into deep space. But in terms of, I think, in terms of the character representation that's the most similar in non-sci-fi, it would be observatory staff. Who are, I think, completely misrepresented in fiction compared to how it is in real life. Like, an observatory is just a place, it's just a big telescope with completely regular people at it. Yeah, they're often somewhat remote because they want to get away from light pollution and stuff, but it is just a big telescope that you drive up to, look at the sky and then go back home. But for some reason, if you watch, especially in anime, if you watch a lot and you see observatories and stuff and the people working at them, they always have this very ethereal, almost elf-like air to them, in the way that they're sort of detached from the rest of the world and completely caught up in looking up at the stars. It's very interesting, and I actually don't know why specifically that expectation has grown. It might just be the remoteness of observatories and that most people can't imagine how their life would lead them to having that as a job, so they kind of what's the word? Mystify? Mythologize? Something adjacent to that. They make them seem like very strange sort of people, but no, it's just a big telescope. And yeah, scanner sensors on a ship are going to draw from that kind of presentation. Which I think is not bad. I do like that in a character, the very in their own head kind of scientist. Maybe a little bit like Ruin May from Star Rail. Would Scanner also fill the role of navigator? No, I think they're fairly separate, generally speaking. At least they're treated fairly separate in a lot of sci-fi. Like, you go to navigation when you're like, okay, we've got this nebula, or we've got this asteroid field and we need you to plot a safe course through it. And they'll use the scanners to see the asteroids, yeah, but their main focus, like, navigation is more about flying the ship, about controlling the vessel itself. They need to be a pilot. Whereas scanners is like, oh, we've detected an anomaly and we need to know everything about it. So you go to whoever runs the sensor array and ask them, hey, can you, I don't know, do some pseudoscience babble? Throw some techno babble at me and get me some readings. Always one of my favorite things in not sci-fi, but like crime shows have this a lot, where you've got a grainy image and they're like zoom and enhance 5 times over, and suddenly we can see the pores on a guy's face for some reason with like a mobile phone camera. If only it worked like that in real life, it would be so much easier. I gotta be honest, one of my least favorite modules in computer science had to be all of the image stuff. All the algorithms and how to remove noise and filters and all of that. I can't claim it wasn't useful, because it's definitely, like, it was immediately applicable as a VTuber, knowing stuff about image editing for thumbnails and knowing stuff about green screening and such for setting up my stream setup, but man, those lessons were boring and difficult to understand. There's a real disconnect between the numbers and the application and how one leads to the other. That might just be me. I generally like maths, but it did not click when it came to image manipulation. Yeah, sensors, scanners. What else might we want? What's something really sci-fi? I mean, the warp core goes in engineering, so that's not really something we need a separate section for. There's AI cores, of course. Yeah, a ship computer, varying degrees of sentient, carrying varying degrees of sentience. I don't know if I have a strong preference for the fully self-aware versus just a machine ship computer. I like the computers in Star Trek where it's just a thing you can ask stuff of and it does exactly what you tell it, but a little bit more fancily because it's the future. Or like Star Wars where you've got a droid sitting in a slot on your fighter and you can talk to it and it gives you actual feedback. I think they both have their strong pros and cons. A ship computer as a character can be quite interesting depending on how integrated into the ship it is. You know, you have separate AI for each task? Or do you have one generalist that handles everything? How does that affect their personalities and such? Do they get paired up with a officer on the bridge, or are they doing things separately? If you enjoy anime and anime adjacent things, there are ship girls, of course. Stuff like Arpeggio of Blue Steel, that's not sci-fi, but it's a pretty good example of it. Not too long ago I read a story by Ravensdagger over on Royal Road called Noble Bright, I think? Let me check real quick. Ravensdagger. Royal Road. What was that called? Yeah, Noble Bright. That was all about like a post-apocalypse solar system where aliens have come in and wiped out humanity, and now a bunch of ship AI are slowly rebuilding themselves and trying to take revenge on the aliens for destroying humans. It was quite well written. I do hope he returns to that story someday. But got enough on his plate as it is. That man writes so fast. It is honestly terrifying. There's some people you look at it and you're just like, where are you finding all of these words? It's ridiculous. How do you write that quick? Look at like Brandon Sanderson or Wildbow, the author of Worm, and people like Ravensdagger. It's just like, you're putting out so many words. And there are other authors who put out a lot of words, sure, but the quality suffers for it, and somehow these guys do it, and the quality stays. It's ridiculous. I hope I can one day work my way up to that kind of output, because it would be incredible. To do that though, I first of all gotta pick one story to actually stick with, instead of constantly writing new documents about stuff I haven't touched before. But now I'll enjoy this. What's another one? What can we put on a ship? What else have I seen in sci-fi that's been interesting? Or what have we seen in non-sci-fi that might be interesting? Maybe different types of ship? What does a submarine have, perhaps, that's different? I feel like a defining factor for a submarine in staying hidden is that they need to know where other stuff is, so the sensor array is very important if you have a stealth spaceship. military ships, they're gonna have weapons and sensors, a transport, cargo and stuff. Do we have a separate section for the cargo? We have a hangar bay. Hangar slash cargo bay. Does that have any sci-fi specific character roles? So you would... There is kind of a character archetype for the sort of dock master. You know, the guy who knows where everything is. You can probably like picture the scene of your main character trying to get some item or other and asking the guy and being like, no, you're not allowed, we're only allowed to issue this and this, and they persuade him, you're like, okay, you can have one, there's a box over there, don't tell anyone. You know, that kind of character. But they're not sci-fi specific. Kind of the opposite to a certain extent of this person. Maybe I do put them in here. The quartermaster, I think? It's a quartermaster who handles supplies. Quartermaster, a regimental officer usually commissioned from ranks responsible for administering barracks, laying out a camp and looking after supplies. A navy petty officer particularly responsible for steering and signals. Okay. Supplies is what we're interested in, it looks like it's the right word. Yeah, the quartermaster. Often pragmatic and nice. Not as giving as the cook, not as all business as the forge master. Sort of middle ground. A reasonable person, basically. Which they kind of have to be because their role demands it of them. It was part of what I was talking about earlier, how the running of a ship and how, you know, there's a saying, running a tight ship. It's important to have everything under control and properly managed and such, which means that a lot of characters on a spaceship do become pretty strongly defined by their roles and by their capabilities rather than their personality or anything else. And yeah, the quartermaster generally has to be capable enough to keep track of all of the stuff they're responsible for, but is also a pretty social character archetype, probably from just the sheer amount of people they have to interact with. You do, I feel like, get alternatively the, how to phrase this, the pencil pusher, if we want to be insulting about it. Here, everything goes where it's assigned and nowhere else. This is the person who will not let you take one extra provision, no matter how good of a reason you have. Everything is supposed to go exactly where it was, exactly where it says on the form, and if you want anything, you better have your own form ready and filled out. Also a nice character for creating some easy strife, I think. They're a very low stakes obstacle, right? Like, okay, the quartermaster tells you no, you can't have a thing. That's probably not going to be the kind of plot point that decides the fate of the whole crew, but it's still an obstacle. It's still something that has to be overcome. Oh, I think my music's just stopped. Let me start the playlist. Go. Okay. So you have a cargo bay. Other characters that are springing to mind for me in terms of like moving cargo around, they aren't even real archetypes, I think, but like, you know, like a forklift driver. If you picture a forklift driver in a show, you probably have a very specific image, or at least I do, but it's not really a character archetype, it's just kind of a certain expectation for these mostly background characters, but are really more defined by the by being window dressing, by what they bring to the aesthetic and flavor of the setting, rather than being a character in and of themselves. I know some people really don't like that approach, but I feel like it's a sensible one to treat the characters as a tool in the story to achieve certain outcomes, rather than insisting on giving every character a real person depth. Especially when there's really only so much ability to translate real person depth into actual in-story appearances, right? You can't convey someone's entire subjective existence on the page, it's just not possible. So while you don't want to do full-on like fridging, where you reduce a character really to nothing and undermine their place in the story by not giving them enough space, you also don't want to overdo it and treat every random person you run into as a fully fleshed out person and not just a couple line character in the background. Exploration. Oh, I guess like a science module? How do you even describe this? The science module. Research deck? There we go. The research deck? Something like that? The lab. The laboratory. What am I even talking about? Science module. The laboratory. Where we study all the cool things we find in space. There is some overlap with the medical bay. It tends to be in a lot of sci-fi that your doctor is also kind of your head scientist in general, or the medical officer and the chief engineer work together on all that kind of stuff. There's not that often a dedicated scientist, even on a scientific mission. I feel like a lot of sci-fi that goes in that direction and that puts that kind of focus on learning about whatever they're finding will have a full team of scientists, each with their own specific roles. Because if you're focusing on it and you're really thinking about it, you'll know and understand that like there isn't such a thing as a general scientist. Each scientist is usually pretty specialized in their field, especially in a sci-fi setting where the fields are so much more complicated and advanced than they are in the present day. And in the present day, you can already be a scientist of a super narrow field, right? Like if you go into biology or whatever, you can make a career out of studying a specific type of cell. One singular cell can be your entire life's work because they're just that complicated. So if we do have a lab with scientific staff, we tend to either just split the work between the sciencey people we already have, which will be medical and engineering, or we have scientists who are specific for the exploration job that we're carrying out. So if you're going out and you're surveying some new alien planet, you'll have biologists and geologists. Actually, yeah, let's have a look here. What's like biologist, geologist, astronomer. What don't we tend to see much of in space? Obviously something like, you know, if you study, I don't know, oceanology, that doesn't tend to pop up. Even if a survey of an ocean might be useful, you probably just kind of scoop up some water, analyze it. You're not sending out submarines from your spaceship. We haven't even explored that much of our world's ocean. You tend to be much more interested in the, you know, like around a landing site for a survey team. They'll take samples of the plants and the atmosphere and the rocks. That kind of stuff we're interested in. Other kind of stuff, not so much. Would we have a vet? a veterinarian. I feel like there's a lot of sci-fi. Oh, is that not how you spell this? Okay. I feel like a lot of sci-fi does put quite a lot of focus on the animals we find on other planets and what we do with those, but it is from a very biologist lens and not a vet or even animal keeper kind of lens. You know, no one's raising livestock on a spaceship, generally speaking. There might be some lab rats around and stuff like that, but not much more. In terms of people you encounter here, it's probably more of the general scientist types. It's just because there's a lot of super science that doesn't require you to be in space, right? Like if you're writing a story with fancy future tech, sci-fi doesn't have to be in space. You know, you can have your like cyberpunk or whatever on Earth and do all the super science there. You can work with psionics and mind powers and all of that. You can have your aliens land on Earth and do all your science there as well. Speaking of aliens landing on Earth and doing your science there, I'm just reminded of the movie Arrival and how interesting that was with all the language stuff. Where would we put a linguist? Because I feel like a translator slash linguist, you know, on the comms console, that was something very... I know a lot of people don't like Star Trek Enterprise as much as the others, the prequel show, where it's an early Enterprise and they're much more low-tech. I feel like that show had some really interesting stuff, and one of the things being that is pre-universal translator, and they have this one officer on comms whose job it is to listen and figure out a translation so they can communicate, was really interesting. And I do think that could be done with that in sci-fi. I understand why there isn't, because it's a really major roadblock. Like if you decide to include languages and difficulty communicating in your sci-fi, it will just kind of dominate the whole plot. The need to be able to talk to someone else and how difficult it is if you can't gets in the way of basically everything. So if you do include it, either it's a constant presence or you solve it pretty early on by having one or two characters learn how to speak and then just imply that translation is happening throughout all of the rest of the story. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can play around with that, where you can have it that two characters get trapped together or lost away from the rest of the crew and they don't know how to communicate, and now suddenly that convenient translator they've been relying on isn't available, they've got to figure it out themselves. And now that's a whole plot you can go with. So yeah, where do I put the linguist? I guess they go on the bridge really, because the captain has to be the one, generally speaking, talking to other aliens they encounter. So let's just put that in here. Com/linguist. Linguist. Important officer. Then more general science. What else are we being scientific about? What else are we studying out in space? Black holes and supernovas and nebulas, anomalies and stuff, so a physicist. You can probably find an excuse to put any kind of scientist up into sci-fi, but we don't generally. It is interesting that a geologist kind of pops to mind for me as one of the core types of scientists for something set in space, which is kind of defined by its lack of geology. But then we don't really stick around in the void of space a lot. A lot of it is just getting to another planet, settling down and seeing what's new and what's interesting. So biologists and geologists are kind of the go-to, because that's what we care about on a planet. Like, what's the soil like? What's the air like? Is anything living here? And can we live there potentially? So these two are really, really important, and then while you're in space, these two are really important. Yvette is kind of the only one that sticks out to me as a, yeah, this is something I would never expect to see. Like, if you tell me that your spaceship has Yvette on it, I'm gonna immediately go, huh? Really? Why? What are you doing with them? How relevant is this going to be to the plot? What are we playing around with here? Like that, this would be a point of interest to me, and I would want to see where it's going. And I don't really think that applies to any other type of scientist, at least none off the top of my head. I think in terms of general facilities you could have on a ship, there are probably more. We could maybe look into like entertainment for the crew, or like a gym and stuff. Do you have to keep fit in space? Do you have a ring on the ship that's rotating to stimulate gravity for people, you know, jogging around on there and stuff like that? That's a little bit more hard sci-fi. Didn't see that as much in others. But I don't think any of those are core. You start to very quickly go into stuff that's going to be specific to your setting. Like, some of this stuff arguably isn't core either. It's just interesting to me personally. That all being said, we are coming up on the 2-hour mark. This is my first stream back after a fairly long hiatus, and my throat is feeling it once again. Maybe someday I'll be able to get a regular schedule going and I'll actually build up some proper endurance for longer live streams, but I don't think that day is quite yet. So for now, I'm going to say thank you very much for watching. Thanks to Tim for the follow earlier. Much appreciate. We inch closer to, well, to having an actual proper follow account, which will be very nice. If my stream, if my Twitch overtakes my YouTube, then I'm going to be disappointed in myself for not making enough videos regularly. So I'd better get on that, and hopefully there'll be some more new stuff now that we're in the new year. I don't have super concrete plans, but in general I will just keep making content as and when I get ideas and inspiration, you know? Until then, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all again next time.